Welcome to Demon Sleep. I'm here to help you unwind tonight. If you enjoy this space, feel free to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It makes this feel like a shared night across the world. These stories are different and I'm glad you're here. Dim the lights, let the room settle, and let's begin. Story 1. The Admirer You Never Noticed. You'd think silence would feel like relief. It doesn't. Silence feels like waiting for the next headline, the next accusation, the next stranger who recognizes your face and decides they know exactly who you are. Mia hadn't made a sound in 40 minutes, not since they turned off the highway, but Caleb could tell she was crying by the way her breathing hitched, shallow, controlled, like she was trying not to disturb the air between them. She'd gotten good at that. Invisible grief, the kind you practice in courtrooms. The house appeared through the trees like a dare. All windows, all edges, a structure designed to look open while keeping everything out. The architect had called it transparent modernism. Caleb called it expensive isolation. 5 kilometers from another living soul, 7 from a gate that actually locked. When the realtor said seclusion, what she meant was, no one will find you here. And after half a year of flashbulbs and microphones shoved in their faces, after questions about the collapse screamed through car windows, seclusion sounded like the only thing worth buying. Caleb cut the ignition. Mia's hand hovered over the door handle, frozen, staring past the windshield at something he couldn't see yet. Then he saw it too. A man, standing perfectly still at the tree line exactly where their land met his. Not waving, not moving, just there, like he'd been counting down the seconds until their engine stopped. Behind him, smoke curled from a crooked cabin chimney. Middle of summer, 90 degrees, and someone was burning a fire. Caleb's chest tightened. The man started walking toward them, not rushing, not casual either, purposeful, like this was choreographed, like he'd rehearsed it. Caleb's fingers found his phone by instinct, the same reflex he'd developed over months of filming everything, documenting every witness, every interaction, every moment someone might later twist into a lie. The man got close enough that Caleb could see the details. High-collared shirt, buttoned all the way up despite the heat, thick leather gloves, expensive looking but strange for the season, and his face. Scars, not small ones, the kind that told a story Caleb didn't want to know. Burns maybe, old ones. The kind that had been stitched and grafted and forced back together but never quite healed right. His jaw, his neck, what was left of his ear. He extended a gloved hand. Caleb shook it because refusing felt worse. The grip was careful, too careful, like the man was afraid of hurting him or afraid of being hurt. "Arthur," he said, his voice was soft, almost apologetic. His eyes kept darting toward Caleb's face, then away. Nervous, hopeful, the kind of look you see in animals that have learned not to trust kindness but can't stop wanting it anyway. He held out a basket, cloth draped over the top. "From my garden," Arthur mumbled, pushing it toward Mia. "Welcome." Then he stepped back, one gloved hand lifted in a small, hesitant wave. And he turned, walked back toward his cabin in quick, uneven steps, shoulders hunched, like he was bracing for something. Mia pulled the cloth away. The tomatoes inside were flawless, almost unnaturally red, still warm like they'd been picked seconds ago. Caleb stared at them, and for the first time since they'd arrived, the silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like a countdown. They smelled like memory, like dirt after rain, like something green and alive that was already dying. The scent crawled into Caleb's chest and stayed there, thick, sweet, raw. It reminded him of his mother's garden, the one she tore apart after his father's body was pulled from the lake. Mia placed the basket on the counter without a word. 3 hours later, the movers showed up. By then, the fruit flies had arrived. Dozens of them, tiny black specks spiraling above the tomatoes like they'd been summoned. Caleb grabbed the basket, turned on the disposal, and shoved them down. The grinding sound was violent, final, but the smell didn't leave. It clung to the inside of his nose for the rest of the day, faint and rotting. Unpacking took a week. Caleb claimed the glass-walled office overlooking the clearing. He shelved his books by last name, positioned his laptop so he could monitor the driveway and Arthur's cabin. On the second day, he ran a search. Arthur Finch, no criminal record, no red flags, inherited money, bought the property 8 years back. Everything checked out. A reclusive man with scars and money who wanted to be left alone. Completely normal. That's what made it worse. Mia drifted through the house like she wasn't really there. She'd open a box, pull out 2 items, then leave the rest scattered on the floor. She stopped brushing her hair, stopped meeting Caleb's eyes. The therapist they'd seen twice said it was a trauma response. Wrote a prescription Mia never picked up. On the 3rd day, Caleb found something on the porch. No knock, no note, just a package wrapped carefully. Inside, a wooden bear. Hand-carved, 8 inches tall. Every detail razor-sharp, individual grooves for fur, claws that looked like they could puncture skin. But it was the face that stopped him. The expression, sad, almost human, like it understood something it shouldn't. This wasn't a hobby project. This was weeks of work. Arthur must have left it during the night. Caleb had checked the porch at midnight. It wasn't there then. Day 6, a bottle of wine. Caleb looked up the label. 1947. Sold at auction for $4,000. He left it on the porch until dusk, then brought it inside. Not because he wanted it, because leaving it felt like bait, like an excuse for Arthur to come back, to knock. Day 9. Caleb was in the living room when he saw him. Arthur standing at the tree line again, motionless, facing their house. Caleb counted the seconds. 5 minutes, maybe more. When he looked again, Arthur was gone. But the grass where he'd stood was flattened, pressed down in the shape of a man. That night, Caleb dreamed about the bridge. Not the collapse, not the screaming or the bodies in the water. Just the bridge before, when it was still whole, when it was still his. In the dream, he was walking across it, and with every step he felt it crumble beneath him, slow, inevitable, dissolving like sugar in water. But he couldn't stop. He woke up with his teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. Mia's side of the bed was empty. He found her in the kitchen, standing there, staring at the wooden bear like it might explain something. Day 12, the collar. Caleb found it hanging from the front door handle, looped like a wreath, like a gift. Cracked leather, brass buckle tarnished green, a name tag stamped in uneven letters, Ranger. The air left his lungs. Ranger was his dog, golden retriever, ages 8 to 12, disappeared one night in September while Caleb was supposed to be watching him. But he wasn't watching. He was in the woods behind the house, doing the thing he'd done for the first time 3 weeks before, the thing that made him feel sharp, awake, in control. When he came back, the yard was empty. His mother was sobbing. The next morning, Caleb found Ranger by the creek, throat torn open, blood soaked into the dirt. He'd taken the collar off, buried it with the body, deep in the soft earth where no one would ever look. No one knew. The police said it was a coyote. His mother believed them. And Caleb never spoke about it again. This collar shouldn't exist. He turned it over in his hands, tobacco brown leather, same scratch on the buccal tongue, same rust stain shaped vaguely like a state he couldn't name, and on the inside barely visible, a brand mark he'd forgotten until now. This wasn't a replica. This was the collar. Arthur had dug in those woods, found the grave, found what Caleb buried 26 years ago. And he'd done it on purpose. Caleb sat down hard on the porch steps. His hands were shaking. Someone had researched his entire childhood, traced records, hunted through estate sales and old transactions, unearthed memories Caleb had spent decades trying to forget. Inside, the shower was running, Mia somewhere far away. Caleb wrapped the collar in his shirt and walked toward the tree line. The property line was marked by a split-rail fence, handmade, every post perfectly vertical, every rail fitted with surgical precision, the kind of work that takes patience, obsession, time. Arthur's cabin sat beyond it, dark except for a single second-floor window, a lamp glowing behind thin curtains, and behind the curtains a shape, packing back and forth, steady, rhythmic. Watching, Caleb turned and walked back. He put the collar in the office safe, the one bolted to the floor, the one that held his passport and encrypted backup drives. He set it on top of a manila folder labeled insurance. Inside, copies of every name, every person who turned on him during the investigation, every betrayal documented. The collar smelled like dirt, like rot, like 26 years of silence finally breaking open. Caleb pulled out his phone and called the police. Have you ever felt someone watching you from inside your own past? Caleb called the police. Not the emergency line, the other one. The number for things that feel wrong but don't sound urgent when you say them out loud. He described everything. The scars, the gloves, the gifts that kept appearing like confessions. He used words like obsessive, unwanted contact, pattern of escalation. The dispatcher said someone would come by. No one came. 3 days later, Caleb called again. The dispatcher had no record of his first call. Day 15, the diary. It was waiting on the porch swing, centered perfectly, spine facing up. A small journal, fabric cover, flowers stitched across it, daisies, roses, forget-me-nots, in that shade of pastel hope only teenage girls can pull off. Water-stained but intact. Caleb knew what it was before he touched it. He stood there, hand on the doorknob, not moving, long enough for his knee to start aching, long enough for the sun to shift. A crow landed on the railing, stared at him, flew away. He opened it. Purple gel pen, little hearts over the is. Rachel Weissman. First entry, January 3rd. His senior year, her junior year. The year before she walked into her garage, closed the door, started her mother's car and stopped breathing. Caleb had dated Rachel for 6 months. When he ended it, clean, surgical final, she fell apart. The school counselor called him in, asked careful questions. Caleb said all the right things, expressed concern, mentioned that Rachel had always been fragile, a little too intense, a little unstable. 3 weeks later, she was dead. The counselor thanked him for his honesty. No one blamed him. Her suicide note didn't mention him at all. But Rachel had kept this diary. Caleb flipped through the pages. Every date they went on, every word he said, what she thought he meant, her plans for their future, college together, marriage, kids named Emma and Jack. Then the entries after the breakup. The handwriting changed. Sentences broke apart. Her thoughts scattered across the page like shattered glass. She wrote his name over and over. Entire pages. Just Caleb, 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 spiraling tighter, darker, more frantic. She documented phone calls he didn't remember making, conversations he was certain never happened, promises he never gave. The final entry, the day before she died. If he won't love me alive, maybe he'll love me dead. And in the margin, written in pencil, neat and controlled. A flawed premise. The artist requires an audience, not a ghost. Caleb's hands went cold. The handwriting was meticulous, measured, the same precision as the highlighting that marked every page. Arthur had studied this diary, analyzed it, added his own commentary like a scholar dissecting a text. And judging by the faded graphite, he'd done it years ago. Long before Caleb ever moved here. Long before they ever met. This diary shouldn't exist. It should have been buried with Rachel, burned with her things, lost to time. But it was here, on his porch. And someone had gone through it with a yellow highlighter, marking every mention of Caleb's name, every declaration of love, every unraveling thought. Like evidence, like proof, like a prosecuting attorney building a case. That's what the highlighting was. Yellow marker tracing every "I love you," every desperate plea, every sentence where Rachel's grip on reality started slipping. Someone had turned this diary into a documented confession. Proof that Caleb knew exactly how broken she was. And ended things anyway. Because her brokenness bored him. He'd known she might not survive it. He'd walked away regardless. Arthur had highlighted that part too. An entry where Rachel wrote about Caleb telling her she was too much, that he needed space. Caleb didn't remember those exact words, but he remembered the feeling, the relief when he finally cut her loose. An hour later, Mia found him, still on the porch, still holding the diary like it might combust. She reached for it. Caleb jerked it away, protective, instinctive, then stopped himself. Let her take it. She read 3 pages, closed it gently, set it on the swing between them, and looked at him. Not accusing, just looking, asking a question she didn't want to say out loud. Who were you? Caleb's mind raced. Someone from high school who knew Rachel. Someone with access to her family's things after she died. Someone with burned scars and shaking hands and too much empty time. The scars, the gloves, the way Arthur couldn't hold eye contact. A kid from high school, Jesse something, small, nervous, the kind who got shoved into lockers between classes. He transferred out sophomore year. Wait, no. There'd been an accident, a fire, junior year, the chemistry lab, someone got burned. The teacher got fired. Caleb had been in that class, running an experiment nearby. Maybe he'd knocked something over, maybe he'd. Or the bridge collapse, 14 dead, some of them burned when their cars ignited. Someone who lost family, who blamed Caleb, who spent years in surgery while Caleb walked free. Too many possibilities. That was the problem. Too many people with too many reasons to hate him. Caleb told Mia they were getting cameras installed. Told her he was handling it. Told her Arthur was unstable, obsessed, dangerous. He used the same steady, confident tone from his depositions, the one that made juries believe him. That night, Caleb waited. Mia took her pills, her breathing slowed, deepened, and Caleb crossed the clearing. Arthur's cabin was dark. Caleb had been watching it for weeks from his office. He knew the patterns. Lights out by 10. Arthur went to bed early, woke before dawn to tend his garden. The back door was locked. The window next to it wasn't. Caleb pushed it open, listened. Silence. The house smelled like sawdust and something sterile, antiseptic, hospital clean. He pulled himself through, landed in a kitchen frozen in time. Avocado green appliances, countertops with a pattern that made his eyes hurt. But everything was spotless. Not just clean. Sterile. Not clean, sterile. The counters gleamed like surgical steel. No dishes, no crumbs, no proof that anyone actually ate here. The refrigerator looked like a hospital inventory. Vegetables in labeled containers, milk and juice with labels facing forward, condiments arranged by height. Caleb moved through the living room. Same obsessive precision, books organized by size, throw pillows angled perfectly, no photographs, no art, just an eerie absence of personality like Arthur had scrubbed himself out of his own home. The stairs didn't creak. At the top, a hallway, 3 doors, 2 closed, 1 open. The open door revealed Arthur's bedroom. He was asleep, or appeared to be. Even unconscious, he wore the gloves, the high-collared shirt. He lay on his back, arms at his sides, perfectly still, like a body prepared for viewing. Caleb tried the first closed door. Bathroom just as sterile as the kitchen. He tried the second. Locked, deadbolt on the outside. Caleb had come prepared. He pulled out his tools. The lock was new, expensive. It took him 4 minutes. The door swung open, and Caleb's stomach dropped. Every wall was covered in photographs of him. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. School pictures, candid shots from birthday parties, yearbook photos, college parties where he was drunk and laughing, studying in the library, kissing girls whose names he'd forgotten years ago. Recent photos too, leaving the courthouse after his deposition, entering the condo, buying groceries. Someone had been following him for decades. The photos were arranged chronologically, a timeline from age 6 to now. Between them, newspaper clippings, articles about his achievements, soccer team making state finals, his promotion, his wedding. And then the other articles. Rachel Weissman's suicide, the bridge collapse. Caleb's name mentioned in both, never charged, never blamed. Arthur had highlighted those mentions in yellow. In the center of one wall, a shrine. A folding table draped in white cloth, candles arranged in a circle, and objects Caleb recognized. The dog collar, Rachel's diary, a soccer trophy from junior year he'd thrown out when he moved, a dried flower from senior prom, a calculator from college, a coffee mug from his first job. Pieces of his life, arranged like holy relics. And photos, Polaroids scattered across the table. Images that made Caleb's throat close. Crime scene photos, not official ones. These were Arthur's, taken at burial sites, years after the fact. Locations photographed from multiple angles, measurements noted in the margins, soil samples documented. Someone had done forensic archaeology on Caleb's crimes, excavating just enough to confirm what was buried there. Not enough to expose them, just enough to prove they existed. The photos showed degraded fabric, bone fragments breaking through disturbed soil, personal belongings Caleb had buried with them. Young people, mostly teenagers, college students, their faces frozen in expressions Caleb remembered putting there. Preserved in driver's license, photos Arthur had somehow acquired and mounted beside his excavation notes. These were his victims. The ones before Rachel, the ones after, the ones in between. The ones who became missing persons reports, cold cases, ghosts. The ones Caleb had taken slowly, studied carefully, left in places designed to maximize their final moments of terror. The ones no one ever connected to Caleb Vance. But someone had connected them. Someone had documented every single one. Someone had built a catalog. Caleb gripped the table edge to stay upright. The Polaroids were arranged in order, each one labeled with a date, a name. Names Caleb remembered, nights he remembered, the specific pleasure of each kill archived, annotated, preserved. This was impossible. No one knew. Caleb had been so careful, varied his methods, changed locations, chose victims with no pattern. He'd gone years between kills when he needed to. He'd built a life that made suspicion impossible, successful, married, respected. But Arthur knew. A floorboard creaked. Caleb spun around. Arthur stood in the doorway, still wearing the gloves, the high collar, eyes wide and gleaming with something that looked almost like happiness. The words poured out of him, fast, desperate. He wouldn't tell anyone, never. He just needed Caleb to know that he knew, that he understood, that Caleb wasn't alone anymore. He had everything documented, every kill, every disappearance. He'd been tracking Caleb for 16 years, since the first time he noticed the pattern. Arthur called him brilliant, called the kills art, gestured at the walls with trembling, gloved hands like a curator, showing off a prized collection. Caleb's hand slipped into his pocket, found the knife, the folding blade he'd carried since he was 14, the one he'd used on his first victim, cleaned, kept, carried ever since. His fingers wrapped around the familiar handle. Arthur's eyes dropped to Caleb's hand, to the knife, and instead of fear, recognition. Arthur knew what that knife meant, knew what it had done. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a witness. He wasn't here for revenge. Arthur was a fan, a devotee, someone who'd spent 16 years worshiping Caleb's work. The dog collar, excavated from a grave Caleb thought was sealed forever. Rachel's diary, purchased from her mother's estate sale. The wine from 1947, Caleb's birth year. Arthur apologized for rambling, said he always talked too much when he was nervous, said he just wanted Caleb to understand that he saw him, the real version, not the mask. Caleb's mind went cold and sharp. This man had evidence, physical proof, DNA probably, enough to bury him for life. Unless Arthur disappeared. Caleb had killed 23 people. One more wouldn't make a difference. He steadied his voice, asked Arthur what else he had. Arthur's face lit up like Christmas morning. He rushed to a filing cabinet, pulled out a thick binder, heavy, professional. My masterwork, he said, voice trembling. A complete biography, every kill, every detail, everything I could verify or piece together. He paused, almost shy. I was hopping, maybe you'd sign it. He held it out. The cover was embossed in gold lettering, the biography of Caleb Vance. Caleb took it, felt the weight, opened it. Pages of printed text, photographs, maps, detailed reconstructions of crimes only the killer could possibly know. Arthur had done the police's job for them, built a perfect confession Caleb would never have to speak aloud. Because it was all here. Arthur mentioned a safe in the basement, fireproof. That's where he kept the originals, the physical evidence. This was just a copy, a gift. He wanted feedback, wanted to interview Caleb, wanted to make sure he'd gotten the details right. Caleb drove the knife into his throat. Arthur's eyes went wide. Not with shock, not with pain. With understanding. A smile touched his lips, small, final, even as blood filled his mouth. His expression said everything. Yes, this is it. This is the art I've been studying. I'm finally part of it. He made a sound, wet, soft, almost grateful. His gloved hands clutched at Caleb's arm as he sank to the floor. Caleb held him, lowered him gently, stayed in control. Arthur's blood spread across the white cloth on the table, soaked into the Polaroids. His mouth stayed curved in that smile. His eyes never left Caleb's face, even as the light drained out of them. Not accusing. Satisfied. Complete. His last breath smelled like copper, and something sweeter underneath. The smell of those tomatoes. Caleb stood. His hands were shaking for the first time in decades. Arthur had wanted this, orchestrated it, walked into his own death with the same devotion he'd brought to 16 years of research. The final exhibit in his own collection. Caleb moved methodically through the house, wiping surfaces, collecting the binder, the Polaroids, every piece of evidence. Every surface he'd touched. The basement safe was exactly where Arthur said it would be, bolted into concrete. The combination was written on a sticky note, stuck right to the door. Arthur's trusting nature. Inside, more documents, flash drives, hard drives, a box of biological samples labeled with dates and names. Evidence of every crime Caleb had ever committed. He couldn't destroy it all, not here, not fast enough. But he could make it look like an accident. He found the gas can in the garage. Spent an hour dousing everything. Walls, floors, Arthur's body. The fumes made him dizzy. He saved the filing cabinet and safe for last. Emptied the rest of the can over Arthur's papers. The match made a tiny sound, a brief flare. Then the fire spread, fast, hungry. Caleb walked out as the cabin began to collapse. Smoke rose in a black column visible for miles. In the distance, sirens. Caleb stripped off his outer clothes in the woods, buried them deep, showered in the guest bathroom, changed into clean pajamas, was sitting on the couch when the fire trucks arrived 40 minutes later. The firefighters couldn't save it. Caleb watched from his porch as they sprayed water onto a skeleton of charred beams. One firefighter turned away and vomited. They'd found the body. A detective came to his door at dawn. A woman in her 50s, tired eyes, gentle questions. Had he known his neighbor well? Had Arthur seemed troubled? The investigation concluded quickly. The accelerant had been spread by the victim himself. A burned, scarred recluse who lived in chronic pain had finally chosen his own way out. Case closed. Caleb almost felt bad about that. Almost. 4 weeks after the fire, Mia handed him a FedEx envelope. Thick, formal, embossed with a law firm's return address. Inside, a letter from Arthur's attorney, informing Caleb that Arthur Finch had named him in his will. Caleb read it twice. The words kept shifting on the page. Arthur had left him everything. The property, a substantial investment portfolio, and specific instructions that certain items in Arthur's fireproof basement safe be transferred to Caleb Vance. The safe. The fireproof safe. Caleb's hands went cold. The letter continued in precise legal language. The fire department had recovered the safe intact. As per Arthur's instructions, the contents had been examined by the executor to ensure proper distribution. The executor had found the contents unusual, but had fulfilled his legal obligation to notify relevant authorities when the material appeared to document serious crimes. The police had everything now. Every Polaroid, every map, every trophy, every flash drive containing Arthur's research. The complete biography, documenting every kill Caleb thought he'd buried forever. And Arthur's final video, recorded the night before he died, explaining that what if the person who loved you most became the one who destroyed you? The letter said Arthur had turned up dead, that Caleb Vance had killed him. But Arthur didn't want prosecution for his own murder. He wanted something else entirely. Exposure of Caleb's life's work. The suicide ruling had been overturned the moment they opened the safe. And because Arthur had willed everything to Caleb, because Arthur had specifically noted in his legal documents that these items belonged to and concerned Caleb Vance, the police now had a direct line connecting the evidence to him. The letter concluded with a single sentence. Detective Catherine Shaw would be in touch regarding the estate. Mia was reading over his shoulder. "What is this?" Her voice had gone thin, brittle. What did Arthur have? Caleb couldn't answer. His throat had sealed shut. Through the window, 2 cars turned into the driveway. Unmarked sedans. Mia saw them too. What's happening? But the question came out broken. The doorbell rang. Caleb stood, then sat back down. His legs had stopped working. The doorbell rang again, harder, followed by pounding. Someone called his name. Detective Shaw's voice, firm, professional. They needed to speak with him. Caleb looked at Mia and watched the exact moment she understood. The way her face changed, the way she took a step back, away from him. The pounding grew violent, wood splintering. They were breaking down the door. Caleb thought about running, but his body wouldn't move. He thought about the knife in his pocket, but that was gone, destroyed in the fire. Except Arthur had already documented it, photographed it, measured it, cataloged every single time Caleb had used it. The door exploded inward. Police flooded the kitchen, guns drawn, voices shouting over each other. On the ground, hands where we can see them, don't move. Caleb obeyed. The floor was freezing against his face. Someone wrenched his arms behind his back, cuffed him, read him his rights in a monotone he barely heard. They hauled him upright, and Caleb saw Mia, pressed against the far wall, eyes wide and shining with tears, staring at him like he was someone she'd never met. Detective Shaw stepped forward, holding an evidence bag. Inside, one of Arthur's Polaroids. A girl 19 years old, college freshman. Chelsea Hoffman, Caleb's 8th victim. He'd been 24, made it look like a hit and run. Shaw's voice was calm, almost gentle. We're going to find all of them, she said. Arthur documented everything: burial sites, methods, timelines. She paused. Your biggest fan was more careful than you were. He mapped your entire career. She wasn't smiling, but Caleb heard the irony. The same irony Arthur had missed in all his worship. Arthur had loved Caleb's work so much that he preserved it, turned it into evidence, waited patiently for years to share it with his idol, never realizing that love this obsessive doesn't protect. It exposes. Arthur had spent 16 years building a shrine, and in doing so, built a cage. The kind you can't escape. The kind that closes around you slowly, carefully, with devotion, until the lock finally clicks. They walked him out through his own front door. News vans were already pulling up the driveway. Caleb recognized some of the reporters, the same ones who'd covered the bridge collapse. They'd loved that story. This one would be better. Mia stood in the doorway, frozen, hand covering her mouth, her whole body trembling like she might collapse. Caleb wanted to say something, wanted to tell her this wasn't his fault, that Arthur had forced him into it, that the scarred man with his sick obsession had left him no other option. But as the car door slammed shut and they pulled away, Caleb realized something. Arthur had given him exactly what he'd always wanted. Recognition, acknowledgement, proof that someone had seen his true self and found it worthy of study. 16 years of study. Arthur hadn't wanted revenge. He'd wanted an autograph, a signature on the biography, maybe a conversation about technique. He'd wanted to share his research with the only person who could truly appreciate it. And Caleb had killed him for it. Murdered the one person who'd ever understood him, who'd documented his work without judgment, who'd spent nearly 2 decades proving Caleb's significance. The fire was supposed to erase everything. Instead, it preserved it. The fireproof safe had protected Arthur's life's work, delivered Caleb's complete confession directly into the hands of the police. Gift-wrapped in Arthur's will. Detective Shaw sat in the front seat making calls. Caleb caught fragments through the partition. Exhumation orders, forensic teams, 23 confirmed sites. She was organizing the excavation of every body Caleb had ever buried. All because Arthur Finch had been a fan. The station was chaos when they arrived. Officers stopped mid-conversation to stare as they walked him through, their faces shifting from professional detachment to something darker, fascinated horror. Word had already spread. The engineer whose negligence killed 14 had actually killed dozens more. They put him in an interrogation room. Gray walls, metal table, the smell of bleach and stale coffee. Detective Shaw sat across from him, opened a laptop, turned the screen. Arthur's work. Spreadsheets, timelines, maps with pins marking burial sites across 3 states. For each victim, Arthur had compiled a complete dossier, photos of them alive, missing persons reports, newspaper clippings about their disappearances. Then the crime scene photos, Arthur's own documentation. Shaw's voice was steady, almost clinical. Arthur Finch had been following you for 16 years, learning your patterns, predicting where you'd go, what you'd do. She scrolled through the files. He documented 23 murders, 23 he could prove. Caleb said nothing. The lawyer he'd called would arrive soon, would tell him to shut up. Shaw kept talking. The beautiful part, Shaw said, Arthur never planned to turn you in. She clicked to another file. His notes make that clear. He wrote about you with reverence, called you the artist, referred to your victims as the collection. She opened Arthur's personal journal, pages and pages detailing his attempts to connect with Caleb, his excitement when Caleb moved nearby, his careful selection of each gift. Shaw's assessment was clinical. Arthur was courting you like a lover. The dog collar, the diary, his way of saying, I know, I see, I understand. And Caleb had killed him for it. Burned his house, destroyed what he thought was all the evidence. But Arthur had been smarter. He'd kept the real proof in a safe designed to withstand 1700 degrees. And he'd written Caleb into his will. Shaw leaned forward. Why do you think he did that? Caleb understood now. Arthur had known Caleb might kill him, had maybe even wanted it. The ultimate connection with his idol, the final act of intimacy. And he'd made sure that even in death, he'd give Caleb the one thing Caleb had spent his whole life avoiding. Recognition. Arthur's will was revenge and gift, twisted together until you couldn't separate them. He'd given Caleb immortality. Every true crime podcast would dissect his story. Every criminology textbook would analyze his methods. Arthur had ensured Caleb Vance would never be forgotten. But he'd also guaranteed Caleb would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Shaw pulled out another evidence bag. Inside, a letter, addressed to Caleb in Arthur's careful handwriting. Want to know what it says? Caleb's throat was too dry to answer. Shaw read it aloud. Dear Caleb, if you're reading this, I'm likely dead, probably by your hand. I understand the risk of revealing how much I know, but I wanted you to understand I don't blame you. You are what you are, and I've spent 16 years celebrating that. This biography is my gift to you. The world will finally see your brilliance. You'll be remembered forever. Isn't that what every artist wants? Your devoted admirer, Arthur Finch. Silence filled the room. Shaw's voice was quiet, almost respectful. Arthur knew you'd kill him, documented it in advance. She scrolled to another entry, dated 3 weeks before his death, predicting Caleb would break into his house, find the shrine, eliminate the threat. He'd even guessed the method. Said Caleb would probably use fire. Shaw closed the laptop. Arthur understood you better than anyone alive, and he still chose to approach you. Walked straight into his own murder because he loved your work that much. She began listing the evidence. Fire investigators found accelerant spread throughout the cabin. Caleb's fingerprints on the gas can. Footprints in the ash matching his boot size. Arthur's autopsy revealed a stab wound, blade approximately 4 inches long. The exact length of the knife Arthur had photographed 6 years earlier. The hesitation marks they'd initially attributed to self-inflicted wound turned out to be defensive injuries. Arthur had grabbed at the blade, tried to stop it. The suicide ruling was wrong. This was murder, premeditated, covered up. Shaw stood. 24 murder charges. The DA thinks we can prove all of them. Arthur's research is that good. A knock at the door. Caleb's lawyer, expensive suit, rehearsed concern. He'd tell Caleb to plead insanity, to claim Arthur had stalked him, terrorized him, driven him to snap. The lawyer would try to paint Caleb as the victim, but the evidence would tell Arthur's story. The biography of Caleb Vance. Arthur had made him famous, given him the recognition he'd always secretly wanted, transformed him from nameless killer to criminal legend. Caleb thought about Arthur standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the house with patient devotion. The hand-carved bear that took 3 months to finish. The wine from 1947. Arthur's face in those final moments, not just confusion, not just hurt. Gratitude. Like Caleb had finally given him what he'd been waiting for all along. The lawyer was talking now, asking questions Caleb didn't hear. Through the window, officers were gathering. Someone wheeled in boxes. Arthur's files. Years of meticulous research now cataloged as evidence. Shaw paused at the door. We're sending teams to excavate the sites Arthur identified. 23 families are going to get answers because of his work. She looked at Caleb. Arthur's going to be remembered as a hero. The door closed. Caleb sat alone with his lawyer, who was already mapping out a defense strategy, talking about reasonable doubt, jury psychology, character witnesses. But Caleb wasn't listening. He was thinking about the shrine, the white cloth, the candles, the objects arranged like holy relics. The reverence in Arthur's eyes, the trembling excitement in his voice when he'd offered the biography. Arthur had wanted so little. Just acknowledgement. And Caleb had given him the only thing he knew how to give. Death. Outside, the sun was setting. In a few hours, the news would break. Mia would file for divorce. His name would become a permanent entry in the annals of evil. All because of Arthur Finch, the scarred recluse who'd loved him. Caleb closed his eyes and saw Arthur's face again. The moment the knife went in, the confusion, the hurt, the betrayal. Arthur had trusted him, believed in him, spent 16 years documenting his brilliance. And Caleb's final gift had been exactly what Arthur had studied all those years. A perfect murder, executed with surgical precision. Except this time, the evidence didn't stay buried. This time, the fireproof safe protected the truth. This time, Caleb's victim had prepared for his own death and turned that death into undeniable proof. The lawyer asked another question. Caleb opened his eyes. "I'll cooperate," he said. "I'll show you where the bodies are, all of them, even the ones Arthur didn't find." The lawyer's face went white. He started to object. "We haven't discussed this. You can't just..." But Caleb was done. Done hiding, done running, done pretending. Arthur had spent 16 years trying to make him visible. And now finally he was. What's the worst thing that can happen to someone who spent their entire life hiding? Being seen completely. Arthur had given Caleb a gift he never asked for, the certainty of being known. And if he was going to be known, he'd be known entirely. Arthur wanted the complete biography. Caleb would give it to him. The confession took 4 days. Caleb walked them through everything. Dates, locations, methods, details only the killer could know. Some matched Arthur's research perfectly. Others were new. Victims Arthur had somehow missed. By the end, the count was 32. 32 families who'd finally learned what happened to the people they loved. 32 cold cases closed because of Arthur Finch's obsession. And Caleb Vance's need to be understood correctly. The media called it the most thorough confession in modern criminal history. Called Arthur a hero who'd solved decades of mysteries. Called Caleb a predator who'd hidden in plain sight for 30 years. Both assessments were accurate. Mia filed for divorce before the confession went public. The papers arrived with a handwritten note. I never knew you. She was right. Arthur had been the only person who ever really did. The trial was brief. Caleb pleaded guilty to all 32 counts. No negotiation, no defense. The judge called him a predator, a sociopath, a malignancy. Sentenced him to 32 consecutive life sentences. On his last day of freedom, if you could call sitting in a courtroom wearing shackles freedom, Caleb was escorted past the gallery. He saw the families of his victims, faces etched with grief, rage, relief. He saw the journalists already crafting their headlines. He saw Mia in the back row, expression carefully blank. And in the front row, he saw a woman in her 70s, with Arthur's eyes. His mother, probably. She was holding a copy of the biography. The police had returned Arthur's research to his family. They'd published it privately. All proceeds donated to the victims' families. The woman caught Caleb's gaze and nodded once. Not forgiveness, not hatred, just acknowledgement. She knew what her son had done, understood the obsession that consumed his final years, knew he died happy. Caleb nodded back. The guards pulled him forward, out of the courtroom, toward the transport van that would carry him to the place he'd spend the rest of his life. For 30 years, Caleb had been the author of his own story, carefully editing every chapter, controlling every detail, ensuring his legend remained entirely his. Now his biography belonged to a dead man. Arthur Finch hadn't just exposed him. He'd stolen the copyright to his entire existence. Caleb had become a character in someone else's work, forever defined not by his own meticulous construction, but by the obsessive research of a scarred, lonely man who'd loved him enough to orchestrate his own death. The final irony was inescapable. Arthur Finch had been a better storyteller than Caleb had ever been a killer, had documented everything with more precision than Caleb ever achieved, had ensured the narrative would outlive them both. Caleb had spent 3 decades perfecting his craft, and in the end, his most devoted student had surpassed him. Not in violence, in vision. Arthur understood something Caleb never did, that the greatest power isn't in taking a life. It's in controlling how that life is remembered. And now, forever, Caleb's story would be told in Arthur's voice. The artist had become the subject, the hunter the trophy, the author a footnote in someone else's masterpiece. Have you ever been so desperate that you'd say yes to anything, even when you know you shouldn't? Story 2, The Civic Lesson. Lucas had been staring at his phone for 17 minutes. Not scrolling, not reading, just staring. 3 browser tabs open, 3 different nightmares. The first, his mortgage account, $845,293, 53 days past due. The second, medical billing, $186,449, chemotherapy, palliative care, the final week in hospice before his wife stopped breathing. The third, his bank balance, $1,274. The math didn't work. It would never work again. Then the notification appeared. No sound, no vibration, just a white envelope icon materializing at the top of his screen like it had always been there. He hadn't received an email, no text message either. He tapped it anyway. The envelope opened. A single line of text, embossed formal. You have been selected for Civic Beta access. Before he could react, the app started downloading. He didn't authorize it, didn't click anything, it just installed itself. The icon was clean, professional, almost governmental. A laurel wreath circling a miniature neighborhood, pristine streets, orderly homes, everything perfect. Lucas opened it. A registration form appeared, standard at first, name, address, employment status. Then the questions changed. Household composition, dependents, total debt broken down by category, monthly income versus expenses. The app requested permissions, banking data, location, camera, microphone. For verification purposes only. Lucas's thumb hovered over the screen. At the bottom, a liability waiver. By participating, you acknowledge this is a high-stakes civic improvement program with substantial rewards for completion. He stared at it. What did he have left to protect? He accepted everything. The moment the permissions went through, a voice came from his phone speaker. Male, warm, the kind of precise, mid-century diction you'd hear in old newsreels. Welcome, Lucas Brennan. We've been watching your contributions. He almost deleted it. Then the next screen loaded. An aerial photograph, his street, his actual street. His house sat dead center, the lawn overgrown, the gutters he hadn't cleaned in 8 months clearly visible even from this height. A red pin marked his exact location. Your community needs you, the voice continued. Smooth, reassuring. We've identified 13 opportunities for civic improvement in your neighborhood. Lucas froze. $5,344,000. His brain couldn't process a number that large. Not anymore. Not when he counted in hundreds, in tens. Then a second figure appeared below it. $1,034,191.90. His exact total debt, down to the penny. The first task arrived Saturday morning at 6:45. Lucas had been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table. Laptop open to job listings he was overqualified for. Apartments he couldn't begin to afford. Down the hall, James' bedroom door stayed shut. The kid had been sleeping past noon lately, missing school, responding to Lucas's questions with shrugs and one-word answers when he bothered to respond at all. 17 years old, and already perfecting the art of disappearing. Lucas's phone buzzed. Task 1, Riverfront Park northeast corner. Estimated time 45 minutes. Reward $100. He almost swiped it away. But when he opened the app, a live video feed loaded. The playground. Beer cans scattered across the wood chips. A used condom dangling from the swing set chain. Graffiti scrawled across the slide in block letters spelling something obscene. Kids would be there in 3 hours for Saturday soccer practice. The app displayed a supply list, trash bags, work gloves, location of the nearest dumpster. Lucas was in his car before he'd consciously decided to go. The park was worse in person. Someone had smashed a bottle against the merry-go-round. Glass glittered in the morning light like crushed ice. The restroom door hung open. Inside, the mirror was tagged with a symbol Lucas didn't recognize. 3 interlocking circles, spray-painted in red. He filled 4 trash bags. His back ached. His hands, soft from years behind a desk creating marketing videos nobody watched anymore, blistered inside the gloves. When he tossed the final bag into the dumpster, his phone chimed. $100 appeared in his account, instantly. Real money, verified by his banking app. The civic interface updated. Community health, plus 0.3%. The voice returned, smooth, approving. Excellent work, Guardian. Your neighborhood is 0.3% safer because of you. Guardian. The word settled in his chest, like something warm spreading through cold water. Task 2 arrived that afternoon. A fence 3 blocks over had been tagged with the same symbol. 3 interlocking circles in red spray paint. The app provided everything. Hardware store address, color-matched paint code, a budget of $150, $50 for supplies, $100 for his time. Lucas stood in the paint aisle for 20 minutes. The fence wasn't his. The owners were the Chens, a young couple he'd met once at a neighborhood cookout before his wife got sick. They both worked long shifts, probably didn't have time to deal with vandalism. Lucas bought the paint, applied 2 careful coats. The Chens never came outside, never saw him working. When he finished, his phone lit up. The deposit posted, and a new message. Community health, plus 0.7%. You are protecting your neighbors. That night, James came home at 2 in the morning. Lucas heard it all. The front door opening, footsteps trying to stay quiet, the soft click of his son's bedroom door. In the morning, Lucas found black paint in the bathroom sink. The kid had washed his hands, but missed a spot near the drain, a thumbprint-sized smear catching the light. Lucas stood there, toothbrush in hand, staring at it. Teenagers stayed out late, got into trouble, that's what they did. He'd been worse at 17, before Sarah pulled him together. Before responsibility arrived in the form of a pregnancy test, and a choice to stop running from his life. He wiped the paint away with toilet paper. Flushed it. Task 3 arrived Monday. Report HOA violation at 2837 Oakmont Drive. The app showed photographs. A front yard converted into a vegetable garden, tomato stakes, bean trellises growing where decorative shrubs should be. The Homeowners Association bylaws loaded automatically, highlighted in yellow. Section 432. No agricultural cultivation visible from public street. Lucas had never reported anyone for anything. But the app made it absurdly easy. Pre-filled form, single button. He pressed it. 2 days later, a notice appeared on the door at 2837 Oakmont. A week after that, the garden was gone, replaced with regulation boxwoods. His phone displayed a $200 deposit. Community health, plus 1.2%. The amounts grew. Task 4 paid $500 to document illegally parked vehicles, cars without current tags, trucks facing the wrong direction on the street, anything violating municipal code. Lucas spent an afternoon walking his neighborhood with his camera out. He'd never noticed how many violations existed everywhere. The app helped him see them. Task 5 brought $1,000 for identifying building code infractions. A garage converted without permits, a fence exceeding height limits, a deck built without proper inspections. Lucas researched regulations he'd never cared about before, learned codes he didn't know existed. The money arrived in steady increments, each deposit announced by that warm voice praising his vigilance. James stopped coming home for dinner. When Lucas asked where he'd been, His son looked at him with something between contempt and pity, then went back to his phone, thumbs moving constantly across the screen. When does trying to save your family become the thing that destroys it? The black paint kept appearing. Under James' fingernails, streaked through his hair, ground into the knees of jeans Lucas found crumpled behind the laundry hamper, not in it, behind it, like his son was hiding evidence. Lucas told himself it was nothing. Art project, skateboard thing, whatever kids did now. But one night, standing outside his son's closed door, he heard James' voice. Different, sharp, clipped, nothing like his usual mumbled teenager speech. Asset marked, waiting for confirmation on secondary location. A pause. No, thermal signature shows occupied, proceeding anyway. Lucas's stomach dropped. Then he rationalized. Video game, had to be. Some online thing where kids talked like soldiers. He went back to his room and checked his bank balance for the 18th time that day. He wanted to confront Jane, demand answers. But confrontation required moral authority. And moral authority required not obsessively refreshing his banking app to watch the numbers climb. $1,900 in 2 weeks. The mortgage company had stopped calling. Task 6 arrived on a Thursday night. Vandalism in progress. 400 block of Riverside. Vehicle defacement. Reward $2,500. Bonus for prevention $5,000. Lucas grabbed his keys before he'd finished reading. The app guided him through streets he'd driven for 15 years. Routes he knew by heart now felt alien under the pulsing green navigation line. When he arrived, 2 figures in hooded sweatshirts were spray painting a panel van. The same symbol, 3 interlocking circles, dripping red. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. The app interface had changed. A new button appeared, red pulsing. Intervene for bonus. Lucas sat there, engine running, heart hammering. 90 seconds passed. The figures finished, ran, disappeared into the darkness between streetlights. Lucas photographed the damage, submitted the report. $2,500 posted to his account. No bonus. The voice said nothing about his failure. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Sarah's side of the bed still carried her scent, faint but unmistakable, though he'd washed the sheets a dozen times since the funeral. The smell was impossible, a phantom conjured by his brain from memory and longing. He turned on his phone. The Civic app displayed his profile. 6 tasks completed. Community health plus 84%. Guardian level bronze. A new notification waited. Task 7 available. Higher Guardian level required for access. Complete bronze certification to unlock. The certification test appeared at midnight. Multiple choice questions, municipal codes, proper reporting procedures, the philosophical foundations of orderly society. Lucas scored 93%. The app congratulated him, upgraded his status. Silver Guardian. Task 7 loaded instantly. Remove blight, Riverside homeless encampment. Estimated time 3 hours. How much money does it take to make you stop seeing people as people? The address led to a dead-end street near the river. 12 tents clustered beneath an overpass. Shopping carts packed with everything someone owned. A makeshift kitchen cobbled together from milk crates and a camping stove. Wet clothes draped over chain-link fence, drying in the morning air. The app displayed instructions. The city had swept this camp twice before. Residents returned within days. A permanent solution is required. Lucas would receive a commercial dumpster, cleaning supplies, and a 4-hour window where police would look the other way. The tents needed to come down, the belongings disposed of, the area made unlivable for future occupation. Lucas sat in his car, engine off, hands on the wheel. A woman emerged from one of the tents. Couldn't have been older than 30, but her face carried the kind of exhaustion that erased age entirely. She poured water from a plastic jug into a dented pot, set it on the camping stove to boil. His phone buzzed. Time-sensitive opportunity. Accept within 60 minutes or task expires. $10,000. Lucas thought about James' college fund, the one he drained 8 months ago to pay for Sarah's final treatment, the one that was supposed to give his son options. He thought about the second mortgage, the credit cards maxed to their limits, the collection agencies calling from new numbers every time he blocked one. He thought about the alternative. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, moving James to a worse district, worse schools, worse chances. He accepted the task. The dumpster arrived at 5 a.m. Lucas waited until 6:30, until he watched the last person leave, heading wherever people go when they have to survive each day from scratch. Then he started. The tents collapsed easily. Cheap nylon meant for weekend camping trips, not permanent shelter. He tossed them into the dumpster, along with sleeping bags that reeked of mold and bodies that hadn't seen a shower in weeks. Clothing, shoes, the small treasures people gather even when they have nowhere to keep them safe. Photographs in water-damaged frames, a stuffed rabbit missing one eye, a Bible with passages underlined in fading ink. He found 14 needles scattered in the dirt, various stages of use. The app had been right about the blight. The personal belongings went in last. Lucas tried not to look at them as individual objects, tried to see them the way the app did, as obstacles to community health, violations of order. But his hands kept stopping. A shoebox filled with letters in careful cursive handwriting. A child's drawing, crayon house with flowers, smiling sun in the corner. He threw them in anyway. The camping stove was last. Lucas held it, felt its weight, its reality. Someone had bought this, chosen this specific model, carried it here, used it to heat water, cook food, hold on to some fragment of normalcy in a life designed to strip that away. Into the dumpster. When he finished, the space looked sanitized, empty. But the concrete showed stains where the tents had been, dark patches in the shapes of temporary homes, ghosts of shelter. Lucas photographed everything from the angle the app specified, submitted his completion report, drove away. $10,000 posted before he reached his street. The voice praised his commitment to community wellness. A new statistic appeared. Blight removed, 12 individuals displaced. Community health, plus 15.2%. Lucas pulled over and vomited into a storm drain. That evening, James came home with paint on his jacket. Red paint, the same shade as those 3 interlocking circles Lucas kept seeing everywhere. His son moved past him without a word, without even looking up from his phone. The shower ran for 40 minutes. When James emerged, the paint was gone. But his eyes carried something new, something colder. "Where were you?" Lucas asked. James' jaw tightened. He looked at his father with an expression Lucas had never seen before. not anger assessment. The way you'd size up an obstacle you're calculating how to remove. Out, James said, and closed his bedroom door. Lucas stood in the hallway, phone in hand, $14,400 in his account, and nothing else. Through his son's door, he heard typing, rapid, constant, punctuated by notification sounds Lucas didn't recognize. Task 8 arrived at 3 a.m. Active vandalism in progress. Commercial district. Immediate response required. Reward $15,000. Equipment provided. Lucas dressed in the dark. The app guided him to an alley behind a strip mall. A figure in a black hoodie was tagging the pharmacy's back wall. The same 3 circles, the same dripping red. But this time, the instructions were different. Guardian level, silver. Authorization granted for active intervention. Equipment, driver's side door panel. Lucas's hands went numb. He opened the panel. Inside, wrapped in plastic, a retractable baton. His breath stopped. The figure kept spraying, oblivious to his presence. Lucas could see now that the vandal was small. Teenager-sized. Teenager-thin. The hoodie hung loose on narrow shoulders. The app interface pulsed. Intervene. Prevent future violations. Community depends on guardian action. Lucas's fingers wrapped around the baton. It extended with a metallic snap that cracked through the alley like a gunshot. The figure whipped around. Lucas couldn't see a face, just the dark void of the hood, and the spray can tumbling from gloved hands, clattering against asphalt. They bolted. Lucas didn't chase. He stood there, baton extended, heart trying to punch through his ribs, hands gone completely numb. 2 minutes passed before he could move. He retracted the baton, put it back in the door panel. No deposit appeared. Instead, a message. Intervention incomplete. Guardian hesitation detected. Proceed to task 9 for redemption opportunity. Lucas drove home, sat in his driveway until the sky turned gray. Through James' window, the glow of a phone screen, still lit at 5 in the morning. Task 9 was different. The reward jumped to $25,000. The instructions were surgical. 3 vehicles parked in residential areas had been flagged as suspicious. Out-of-state plates, no visible permits, repeated presence despite no apparent local address. The app provided photos, license numbers, a list of ordinances these vehicles violated simply by existing where they didn't belong. It also provided a tool. In the door panel, a knife with a hooked blade, purpose-built. The first vehicle was a decade-old sedan, California plates, parked 2 streets over. Lucas circled it twice, checking for witnesses in windows. The app displayed a countdown timer. 90 minutes before the owner returned from night shift at the industrial park. Lucas knelt beside the driver's side tire. The blade went in smooth. The hiss of escaping air sounded deafening in the pre-dawn quiet. He moved to the passenger side, then the rear. 3 tires. The insurance deductible would cost more than replacements, making repair financially irrational. The owner would have to choose expensive fixes or find somewhere else to park, somewhere else to exist. The voice returned. Excellent work, Guardian. These vehicles represented potential threat vectors. Your action has measurably increased neighborhood safety. The second vehicle was a pickup, Texas plates, parked near the elementary school. Lucas's hands moved on autopilot now. 3 more tires slashed. The knife cut through rubber like it was nothing, like skin. The third vehicle was a minivan, Oregon plates. A car seat buckled in back, toys scattered across the dashboard. Lucas stood beside it, knife open, staring at a stuffed elephant wedged between the front seats. 5 minutes passed. His phone buzzed. Timer expiring. Complete task or forfeit reward. Hey, what's the exact moment you realize you've become the monster you were afraid of? He cut all 4 tires this time. He didn't know why, didn't think about it, just did it. The $25,000 appeared before he reached his car. Lucas sat in the driver's seat, looked down at his hands. They weren't shaking. He wanted them to shake, needed some physical proof that what he'd just done mattered, that it registered somewhere inside him, that something had changed. But his hands were perfectly steady, and his bank balance showed $39,400. The mortgage company had sent an email confirming payment received. James didn't come home that night. Lucas called 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. Not the generic automated voice, James' actual voice, from 2 years ago, before his mom got sick, when he still smiled in photos. Hey, it's James, leave a message. Lucas didn't leave any. What would he even say? At 4 in the morning, the front door opened. James moved through the house like a shadow, silent, deliberate. Lucas lay in bed listening, the shower running, his son's door closing, the sound of typing resuming. In the morning, Lucas found 4 slashed bicycle tires in the garage. New tires, expensive ones, still in their packaging. He stood there, staring at the cuts, clean slices that matched the pattern his own knife would leave. A small printed receipt lay folded beside them. Lucas picked it up. Revolt, Task 7 complete. Asset deployment confirmed. $10,000 transferred. He stared at it. Revolt. $10,000. The same amount he'd earned for some of his tasks. His brain made the connection before he could stop it. James asking about the debt, the mysterious late nights, the sudden access to art supplies they couldn't afford, the black paint under his fingernails. Lucas folded the receipt, put it in his pocket. He'd ask about it tonight. He needed to. He didn't ask that night. Or the next. The receipt stayed in his pocket for 3 days, moving from one pair of jeans to another, something he couldn't throw away but couldn't confront. Some truths announce themselves too loud to hear. Some questions already have answers, you know. Task 10 appeared before he could process what the tires meant. Blight recurrence, Riverside encampment reestablished, permanent solution required, reward $50,000, additional equipment provided. Lucas's hands were shaking now. The app showed photographs of the overpass. 6 new tents, erected in the exact spot he'd cleared 2 weeks ago. The same people, probably. The same desperate need for a place to exist. The equipment list was longer this time. There's a specific weight to holding something designed only to destroy. The door panel held items Lucas didn't immediately recognize. Liquid in containers marked with hazard symbols, small electronic boxes with digital displays, ignition mechanisms. The instructions were clinical. The app explained that the encampment occupied city-owned land scheduled for redevelopment. that occupants had been offered shelter and refused, that their presence created fire hazards and public health emergencies. The app never said arson. It said controlled clearance. Lucas accepted the task at 11 p.m. He drove to the overpass in darkness, parked 3 blocks out, approached on foot. The camp was silent except for a radio playing somewhere. Faint music barely cutting through the sound of the river moving past. Someone coughed, a deep, wet rattle, the sound of lungs surrendering. Lucas placed the devices according to the diagram on his screen. The accelerant around the perimeter, the timer set for 12 minutes. 12 minutes to walk back to his car, to be far enough away when it happened, to have distance as an alibi. At the 11-minute mark, a tent flap opened. The same woman from before stepped out, carrying that dented pot again. She walked to the river's edge, knelt, began filling it. The water caught the city lights, turned the surface into something almost beautiful. Lucas pulled the timers, dismantled what he'd assembled, gathered the equipment, walked back to his car. No deposit appeared. Instead, red text filled the screen. Task abandoned. Guardian commitment question. Immediate completion of task 11 required to maintain standing. He drove home with the equipment still rattling in his trunk, the accelerant sloshing in its container. The whole thing felt like a nightmare he couldn't force himself to wake from. James' light was on. Through the window, Lucas could see him sitting on the floor, surrounded by spray paint cans, working on something spread across sheets of cardboard. Task 11 arrived at dawn. Active threat identified. Drug distribution network operating from residential property. Subject has resisted previous intervention. Physical correction required. Reward, $100,000. Equipment, previous inventory plus additional items. The address was 6 blocks away. A small house, bars on the windows, cars in the driveway that came and went at intervals suggesting business, not residence. Lucas had driven past it 1,000 times, never noticed anything wrong. The app provided surveillance footage. There's a moment right before you cross a line where you can still turn back. But you never know which moment that is until it's already gone. The app had compiled evidence, transaction records, license plates cross-referenced with outstanding warrants, surveillance footage time-stamped and cataloged. It built a case, so airtight Lucas felt stupid for not seeing it himself. The evidence was overwhelming. The app explained that police had tried, multiple times, that the subject had connections, that justice through official channels was a fantasy. The app offered an alternative. New equipment in the door panel, brass knuckles, telescoping steel baton, pepper spray. The instructions were surgical. Wait until the subject is isolated. Disable efficiently. Make clear that continued operations will result in escalation. The app emphasized non-lethal force. It emphasized protecting children, protecting families, removing poison from the neighborhood. It emphasized $100,000. Lucas watched the house for 2 days. The subject was a man in his 40s, overweight, balding, moved with the careful gait of someone whose knees had given up years ago. He took out trash Wednesday mornings, retrieved mail in the afternoons. He looked completely ordinary, the way everyone looks ordinary until you're instructed to see them as a threat. Thursday night, the man stepped outside alone to smoke. Lucas approached from behind. The man turned at the sound of footsteps. Lucas saw his face clearly in the porch light. Confusion, then recognition of danger, then fear arriving too late to matter. The first strike shattered his nose. Lucas felt the cartilage collapse, felt warm blood spray across his knuckles. The second blow landed in the ribs. The sound was wrong, too loud, too wet. With each impact, the app's words pulsed through his skull. Protecting children, protecting families, protecting your neighborhood. For 3 seconds, maybe less, fueled by adrenaline and a year of absolute helplessness, the violence didn't feel like violence. It felt like correction, like justice, like he was finally doing something that mattered, something that pushed back against the chaos that had taken Sarah and was trying to devour everything else. The feeling lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then the man's legs buckled, he collapsed, and Lucas kept hitting him, kept delivering strikes that had nothing to do with protection and everything to do with the fact that he could. That someone had finally given him permission to hurt something in a world that had been hurting him for so long. The man stopped moving. Lucas stood over him, breathing hard, hands numb inside the brass knuckles. Blood pooled on concrete, black under the porch light. The righteous feeling evaporated, replaced by something cold and sick spreading through his gut. For one terrible moment, Lucas thought he'd killed him. Then the man's chest rose, shallow, labored, and Lucas felt relief so intense he almost collapsed. He walked back to his car on. When you finally understand what you've become, it's usually because you're holding proof in your hands. Lucas made it back to his car on legs that barely functioned. Drove home, stripped in the garage, sealed his clothes in a trash bag. Stood in the shower until the water went ice cold, scrubbing at hands that still felt sticky long after the blood spiraled down the drain. $100,000 appeared before he'd finished drying off. Community health, plus 46.3%. Guardian level, gold. One task remaining. Jane was gone when Lucas came out of the bathroom. His son's room showed signs of rushed evacuation. Drawers yanked open, hangers scattered across the floor. On the desk, James' laptop sat open to a feed Lucas didn't recognize. Every post tagged with the same symbol, 3 interlocking circles. The posts talked about resistance, about fighting back, about forcing the system to acknowledge them. Lucas closed the laptop. His phone displayed a notification. Final task available. Reward pending verification. Account balance, $139,400. He waited 3 days. The man he'd beaten was in ICU, punctured lung, broken ribs, shattered jaw. The news called it a robbery gone wrong. No suspects, no witnesses. The app sent a message. Threat neutralized, supply chain disrupted. James didn't come home. Lucas filed a missing persons report. The officer barely looked up from his paperwork. 17-year-old boys run off sometimes. They come back, give it a week. Lucas gave it 6 days. Then task 12 appeared. The notification arrived at midnight on Saturday. Lucas hadn't slept in 40 hours, running on coffee and the frantic energy that comes from waiting for disaster you can't stop. Task 12, critical intervention required. Multiple acts of vandalism, property destruction, and civil disorder linked to coordinated subject. Threat assessment, maximum. Location, warehouse district, 2837 Industrial Way. Event unsanctioned gathering, 200 plus participants. Subject will be wearing red devil mask. Neutralization required. Time window, 11 p.m. 2 m. Reward upon completion, $5 million. Equipment final inventory. Lucas opened the door panel with hands that had gone completely numb. Inside, a handgun, polymer frame, suppressor already attached, 17-round magazine. The weight was different from anything he'd held before. Heavier and lighter simultaneously, dense with terrible potential. The app displayed a photo of the mask. Red horns, leering grin, the kind you'd see at a protest, a festival. Below it, a dossier. Subject has orchestrated 17 acts of vandalism in the past. There's a specific kind of silence that happens right before everything changes forever. Lucas read the file 17 times, stared at the photo of that red devil mask, picked up the gun, set it down, picked it up again. The weight never changed, but what it meant kept shifting. At 10:30, he drove to the warehouse district. The building was enormous, corrugated metal walls covered in layers of that symbol, 3 circles, over and over, fresh tags and old ones bleeding through. Music pounded from inside, bass so deep Lucas felt it vibrating in his sternum. The parking lots were packed, nice cars, expensive ones, vehicles that didn't belong in this part of the city. Lucas parked 3 blocks out, walked the rest. The gun hung heavy in his jacket pocket. His phone displayed a live thermal map of the building's interior, heat signatures moving, exit points marked, the basement level highlighted. Subject location confirmed. 200 people inside, young people from what Lucas could glimpse through a cracked door. Dancing, laughing, drinking from plastic cups. A party. The app called it an unsanctioned gathering, but it looked like every college party Lucas had gone to before Sarah, before responsibility, before life compressed to the width of bills he couldn't pay and debts he couldn't escape. The app guided him to a service entrance. The door was unlocked. The app had made sure of it. Lucas descended concrete stairs into darkness. It smelled like rust and standing water. The music was muffled down here, reduced to rhythmic thumping that made the metal walls shiver. He found the boiler room at the basement's far end. The door was marked with a red devil symbol, that same grinning face from the photo, spray painted fresh. Lucas's hand closed around the gun. Inside, a figure stood with their back to him. Black hoodie, black jeans, the red devil mask covering their entire head. They were looking at their phone, thumb scrolling. Lucas could see the 3-circle symbol displayed on the screen, and text he couldn't read from this distance. His phone buzzed silently against his ribs. Subject confirmed. Neutralize now. Transfer will complete upon verification. Lucas raised the gun. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd stopped shaking. Somewhere between breaking that man's ribs and right now. He transformed into someone whose hands stayed steady. The figure turned. The mask's hollow eyes found him. Neither moved. Take it off, Lucas said. The figure's hands rose to the mask's edge. Lucas's finger slid to the trigger. Everything he'd done, the camps, the tires, the beating, had been preparation for this. The app had been conditioning him, making him harder, making him capable. The mask lifted slowly. Dark hair emerged first, then a familiar profile. Then eyes Lucas had looked into every single day for 17 years. James stared at his father. His face was thinner than Lucas remembered, cheekbones knife-sharp, eyes carrying the same exhaustion Lucas saw in his own reflection. The boy's phone slipped from his grip, clattered against concrete. Lucas's finger froze on the trigger. His brain registered what he was seeing, but couldn't process it, couldn't bridge the gap between target and the crosshairs and his son. James' mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes traveled from Lucas's face to the gun, back to Lucas's face. Understanding arrived in waves. First, recognition, then situation, then what was about to happen. "Dad," James whispered. The word punched the air from Lucas's lungs. His ribcage felt like it was collapsing. The gun wavered. Behind him, the door swung shut. The lock clicked. Lucas spun, no one there. Just a timer mechanism bolted to the frame, programmed to seal the room at a precise moment. His phone screen lit up white-hot. The app's interface had transformed. A countdown, 30 seconds. Below it, verification window closing. Eliminate subject or forfeit all rewards, and face prosecution for previous tasks. Lucas looked at his son. James' hands were raised, palms out, universal surrender. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. He looked terrified and resigned, like he'd known this moment was inevitable, like he'd been waiting for it. "What did you do?" Lucas's voice sounded alien, distant, like someone else speaking through his mouth. James' throat worked. There's an app, Revolt, they pay you to." He stopped, started over. "I was trying to help with the debt. I thought if I could." 20 seconds. Lucas's phone split the screen. Left side, Civic's interface. His 12 completed tasks listed. Right side, a mirror interface labeled Revolt, 12 corresponding tasks. The spray painting, the tent city, the slashed tires. Every act of chaos Lucas had been paid to correct had been James' assignment. Every dollar Lucas earned, James earned too. They'd been working for the same company, against each other, for an audience. 15 seconds. "The final task," Lucas said, voice breaking. "What was yours?" James' face collapsed. "Kill the guardian of order. They said you were planning." There's a sound a gun makes that you can never unhear, even with a suppressor, especially when it's pointed at your own son. "Violence, they showed me everything you did, the man you beat, His voice shattered. "I thought I was stopping a terrorist." 10 seconds. Lucas stared at the gun in his hand, looked at his son standing there. The app flashed the number across his screen. $5 million, pending, conditional on completion. Enough to erase every debt. Enough to secure the future Sarah had wanted for Jane. Enough to make all of this, every terrible thing, mean something. All he had to do was squeeze. 5 seconds. James lowered his hands, straightened his spine. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady. "Do it, you need the money for the house, for..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Mom would want you too." Lucas's finger tightened. The pressure required was shockingly light, a few pounds of force. Less than the weight of conscience. Less than the weight of everything that had brought them both to this basement. 0. The gun fired before Lucas consciously decided. The suppressor turned the shot into a wet cough. James jerked backward, hit the wall, slid down slowly. His hand went to his chest. Blood spread between his fingers, turning his black hoodie darker. Lucas dropped the gun. His phone chimed. Transfer complete. $5 million. Real money. Verified. Cleared. The app displayed one final message. Order restored. Thank you for your service, Guardian. Lucas collapsed to his knees beside his son. James' eyes were still open, still focused, still seeing him. His breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps. Lucas pressed his hands over the wound, but blood welled up anyway, warm, unstoppable, soaking through his fingers. I'm sorry, his voice broke completely. James' hand moved. Not toward the wound, toward his phone on the concrete, screen cracked but still glowing. Lucas saw the Revolt interface, saw James' completed tasks listed in order, saw the final message. Chaos achieved. Thank you for your service, revolutionary. $5 million transferred. Lucas looked at his own phone. The identical deposit, the identical congratulations. They'd both won. Both earned their blood money. The company had paid them each $5 million to kill each other. And somewhere people had watched it happen, paid for the privilege, placed bets on the outcome. James' hand found Lucas's arm. His grip was already fatting, fingers going cold. His lips moved, forming words Lucas had to lean close to hear. I was trying to help. His hand went slack. His eyes stayed open, but stopped seeing anything at all. The basement fell silent, except for the muffled music from above. The party continuing, oblivious to what had just happened beneath their feet. Lucas sat there, hands covered in his son's blood. $10 million in combined accounts, and nothing left worth saving. What's left when you realize your entire nightmare was someone else's entertainment? Lucas sat on cold concrete, holding his son's body. His phone kept glowing. Banking notification. Deposit confirmed. Mortgage company, payment received. Account current. Somewhere above them, someone laughed. The bass continued its mindless pulse. Lucas looked at James' phone, still unlocked in his dead hand, still showing the Revolt interface. At the bottom of the screen, barely visible, a company logo. Civic Revolt, a division of Engagement Dynamics LLC. Below it, a tagline. Monetizing conflict, optimizing chaos, delivering content. And below that, 846 active premium members. Lucas reached out with blood-wet fingers, picked up his son's phone. The screen displayed James' full task history, a perfect mirror of his own. But there was more. The registration form, still cached in memory. The same invasive questions Lucas had answered. Household composition, father sole guardian self. Total household debt, $1,034,191.90. Primary motivation for participation, help father avoid bankruptcy. They hadn't been randomly selected. They'd been matched. The company received both applications, saw the family connection, the shared address, the mirrored desperation, and recognized the potential, not for conflict resolution, for content. Every act of chaos perfectly calibrated to generate a corresponding act of order. Every spray-painted symbol placed exactly where Lucas would be sent to erase it. Every tent erected in the spot Lucas would be paid to clear. every tire slashed on vehicles Lucas would report. They'd been performers in a production neither knew existed. The audience had watched them spiral toward this moment, paid escalating fees for better camera angles, placed wagers on which one would break first, which one would complete the final task. The comment section sat below the subscriber count. Lucas scrolled with James' blood drying on his hands. Season 12 finale exceeded expectations. Father-son pairing was inspired. Wire transfer confirmed, $2.03 M for exclusive ending rights. Worth every penny. Next cycle needs better production value. Recommend embedded targets for international appeal. 846 premium members and we can't get 4K. Upgrade the infrastructure. Not millions of casual viewers. A carefully curated audience. Wealthy enough to pay millions per season for access to something no amount of money could legally purchase. Oligarchs, cartel leaders, people who'd exhausted every conventional entertainment and discovered that human desperation, filmed in real time, was the only thing that still registered as novel. Lucas set down James' phone. He looked at his own phone. At $5 million that would save the house, secure his future, and mean absolutely nothing. He looked at James' face, peaceful now, finally free of the exhaustion that had carved itself into his features for months. The timer on the door clicked. The lock disengaged. Lucas could leave now. The app provided everything. Exit routes, disposal protocols, alibi construction. Complete service for premium guardians. He didn't move. Above, the music shifted, something slower, feet shuffling across the warehouse floor. Someone shouted a name, someone laughed. Life continuing, with the same cold indifference that had always defined it. That would keep going long after Lucas and James became footnotes in someone's quarterly profit report. His phone buzzed. One final notification from Civic. Congratulations, Guardian. Your service has been exemplary. You've been selected for Season 13. First task available in 30 days. Estimated total rewards, $10 million. Lucas picked up the gun from where it had fallen. The weight was familiar now. He understood its language, its purpose, its elegant reduction of complex moral questions into something binary. Trigger pulled or not pulled, task completed or abandoned, order or chaos. The app had taught him that everything reduced to this, that every human connection could be gamified, monetized, optimized for engagement. That love and loyalty and the bond between father and son were just variables in an algorithm designed to maximize conflict. Because conflict was content, and content was currency, and currency was the only truth that survived. He raised the gun. His finger found the trigger. The metal still warm from the shot that killed his son. His phone buzzed again. Banking notification. $5 million deposit successfully invested in high-yield account. Estimated monthly interest, $18,750. Your financial future is secure. Lucas's hand trembled. For the first time in months, his hand shook. The physical reaction his body had suppressed through 12 tasks of escalating horror finally surfaced. Too late to matter. His finger tightened. Above him, the music stopped abruptly. Voices rose in confusion. Someone had found the service entrance. Footsteps pounded down the stairs, fast, getting closer. Lucas had maybe 30 seconds before the crowd flooded the basement. Before they discovered him with his dead son, and the smoking gun, and the phone displaying 5 million reasons why. He could pull the trigger now, end it before they arrived. Deny the company its sequel, its follow-up content, its tragic epilogue to a successful season. Or he could wait. Let them find him. Let them see what their entertainment actually cost. His finger trembled on the trigger. The footsteps grew louder. And Lucas made his choice. The choice he made wasn't about mercy. It was about testimony. His finger relaxed on the trigger. He lowered the gun. The footsteps hammered closer. Lucas looked at James' face one last time, memorizing features he'd first seen 17 years ago in a hospital delivery room. When Sarah placed the screaming, impossibly small infant in his arms. When he'd believed himself capable of protecting something so fragile from a world designed to break it. He'd been wrong about his ability to protect, but right about the world. The door exploded inward. A girl in a glittering mask screamed. Others crowded behind her, phones already raised, already filming. Lucas watched them process the scene, watched their expressions shift through shock, horror, and, on some faces, a kind of ravenous fascination. They were creating content too, he realized, uploading their reactions in real time, feeding the same machine that had orchestrated all of this. Someone dialed 911. Someone else asked what happened. Lucas said nothing. He sat with his son's body and waited for police, for questions he couldn't answer, for the trial that would dissect his choices and find them both understandable and monstrous. His phone glowed in his lap. The Civic app sent another notification. Content performance exceptional. Viewer engagement 837% above average. Bonus payment $500,000. Thank you for your service. Lucas picked up James' phone from his son's cooling hand. The screen still displayed the Revolt interface, perfect mirror of his own journey. He held both phones side by side, watching identical systems process the same data, celebrate the same outcome, prepare for the next cycle. In the comments section, new messages appeared live. Season finale was perfect, worth every penny. Sequel with dad in prison, would subscribe. Need to find new players. This market is getting saturated. The police arrived 14 minutes later. Lucas was still on the floor, both phones in his hands, James' blood soaking through his jeans to the concrete beneath. An officer told him to stand. Lucas tried to explain about the app, about the tasks, about the algorithm that transformed him into a killer and his son into a casualty and both of them into entertainment. The officer looked at him with the particular pity reserved for the obviously delusional. Lucas showed him the phones. The officer examined them carefully, scrolled through the banking app. His eyebrows climbed at the deposit amounts. He opened the application list. The Civic app was gone. The Revolt app was gone. Both screens showed only standard programs. Messages, email, social media. Nothing unusual, standard apps only. The officer tapped the screen several more times, trying to access deleted files, system logs, anything. His phone rang, he answered, listened for 30 seconds without speaking, hung up. When he looked at Lucas again, his expression had transformed. Not pity, something colder. "Sir," he said, voice completely flat, You need to come with us. Lucas noticed the officer didn't bag the phones as evidence, didn't photograph the screens, just powered them both down, handed them to his partner, who set them on a nearby crate instead of in an evidence bag. Lucas let them cuff him, let them recite his rights, let them lead him up the stairs past the crowd still recording everything. Outside, more phones captured his exit from the warehouse. The footage would spread instantly across platforms, accumulate views, reactions, shares, would become exactly the content the company had purchased. In the patrol car, Lucas asked about the phones. The officer driving didn't answer. His partner stared out the window at nothing. Lucas's phone, still sitting on that crate in the basement, would never reach evidence lockup. By morning, both devices would be listed as misplaced during scene processing. Digital forensics would file a report documenting the loss. The investigation would continue without them. The backseat smelled like bleach and accumulated human misery. Through the window, Lucas watched the warehouse shrink in the distance. The party had already resumed. He could see shapes moving behind the windows, the gathering returning to its original purpose now that the interruption had been properly documented and distributed. Lucas closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he saw James' face. Not the empty mask of death. The living boy, 10 years old, laughing at something Sarah said, completely unaware that in 7 years his mother would be gone and his father would become unrecognizable, and they'd both complete registration forms designed with surgical precision to identify them as perfect subjects. A father and son desperate enough to annihilate each other for money they'd never spend together. The patrol car moved through empty streets. Somewhere in the city, phones that would never reach evidence were being remotely wiped, data shredded beyond any forensic recovery. The banking records would survive, would condemn Lucas absolutely, but would lead nowhere. The transfers originated from a legitimate corporate account, properly taxed, with documentation showing Lucas as an independent contractor who'd signed an NDA he couldn't produce because the app had managed that detail too. Everything legal, everything clean, everything designed to vanish the moment it served its purpose. The algorithm was already processing data from this cycle, calculating optimal combinations for the next season. Somewhere right now, someone desperate was completing a registration form, answering invasive questions, granting permissions they didn't fully understand. Somewhere else, someone they loved was doing exactly the same thing. And in a climate-controlled server farm 3 states away, the algorithm identified the connection, calculated the potential, began matching the next pair of participants. The system didn't pause, didn't mourn, didn't learn anything except which variables generated the most engagement. Lucas had killed his son for $5 million and premium subscriber entertainment. Tomorrow, someone else would start walking the same path. Different names, different debts, different justifications. Same ending. The patrol car turned a corner, and somewhere, a notification appeared on a desperate person's phone. You have been selected for civic beta access. The cycle beginning again. Endless, optimized, profitable.